Life is uncertain by definition, and it's easy to think that if we don't achieve something, our effort toward it was wasted. But as the saying goes, rejection is God's protection. Sometimes life will stop you from achieving what you weren't meant to do and give you something far better in its place. Today, Nate Barkocy joins us to discuss a catastrophic injury that changed his life, as well as hard work, marriage, and fatherhood, what it means to live with faith, building your tribe, accountability, and so much more. I am your host, Gabriel Schickler, and welcome to the Operation Paragon podcast. Yes, so greetings everybody. I am sitting down with Nate Barkocy, who has been a friend, a bit of a role model, and just overall a really good guy the past, man, it's been a while, 4 or 5 years at this point that
5 years
I've
now.
known
That's
you. Yeah,
crazy.
it is
Yeah.
crazy. But yeah, so we both attended the Franciscan University of Steubenville. He was a couple years ahead of me, and we met through a household, which is basically uh, in the proper form, all the good parts of a fraternity and none of the bad ones.
Well,
Uh,
what I say is it's a Catholic boy frat, Take
yes.
that as you will, but
Hmm.
it's that's what we call it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But so I had the honor of meeting Nate and several other really solid men who had built this community and this brotherhood. And so we've, obviously been friends for a few years now, seen each other every so often. He graduated, got into real estate and a whole lot of other things as well. And we'll get into that story a little
Yeah.
bit as time
I
goes
appreciate
on.
you. I appreciate you giving all the other boys credit and saying that they
Hmm.
were all a bunch of other good men. So that's a
I mean, I wouldn't have
cheers to
I wouldn't
them,
have
man.
joined if I don't know if you heard this story, but there was like that first Saturday I showed up. I think it was Joy, and I was just like, "Yep, these are my guys." For the audience, Joy is a specific event, and no, I will not elaborate. Um, but yeah, so before we get into that side of things, though, I want to take us back a little bit because you have a bit of a fascinating backstory with what I think can only be reasonably read as divine intervention.
Mhm.
So take me back to that and the accident.
Yeah. Yeah. So my name's Nate, and man, it's a long story. I'll try to tell the Spark Notes version of it.
Hmm.
Yeah, so this was in 2016. I was a competitive cyclist, like, Grand Tours, Tour de France type stuff. It was just my dream, man, but the love of my life, man. I was riding my bike.
You were early high school at this point, right?
Yeah, early high
Okay.
school. I was riding my bike every day, man. Really, really doing big stuff. This was freshman year of high school. Um, and so my first race that I ever did, I won it, and it was the state championship. So I thought, you know what? I kind of like this. I like this cycling thing. So I was sticking with it, and everything was going great. I qualified for nationals. I was the youngest to win the Tour of the Gila, which is the biggest regional race down in Silver City, New Mexico. That qualified me for nationals. So I went to nationals, and I had only been riding for about a year and a half by that point. So not a ton of training, but I was still able to place top 10 in the nation for my age group. And man, that was just the dream. So as a
Hmm.
16-year-old, I was ready to go race in Europe and start doing, those big grand tours, maybe race in Spain, race all over the world,
Hmm.
go to the Olympics, do all of the large competitions. And
Wow.
yeah, so that was in 2015 is when I won. I mean, when I was in nationals and when I won the Tour of the Gila. And then in January of 2016, I was training with my team, and I was hit by a car at around 60 miles an hour.
That's
So I
not
was
that's not one
immediately,
six. That's 6-0.
yeah, 6-0. Yeah, 6-0. So immediately I was in a coma upon impact. And I mean, man, the images of the whole event are just shocking, right? My bike
Hmm.
is torn apart. You can see where my shoulder smashed into the windshield, and then my body and bike tore up the bumper of the
So
car
you have
and the
pictures
body
of
of the
this.
car. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And then yeah, I was on the ground unconscious, obviously. So that was very devastating for my coach because he was still conscious.
Hmm.
He had fallen off his bike too, but obviously not as bad. He wasn't hit by the car. I was the only one hit by the car. Um, and so he thought I was dead, right? And so
Hmm.
actually the ambulance picked me up, and the officer who was at the side of the scene reported it as a fatality. So I was reportedly dead in the eyes of the law. And then they took me to the hospital, and God bless my parents, right? Because they were going to the hospital thinking Nathan's dead, you know?
Hmm.
So, I mean, I just can't imagine. I can't imagine that. Especially now that I've recently stepped into the shoes of being a father myself.
Hmm.
I can't imagine that. So, um, 2 weeks I was in a coma. And that was just a natural coma. I was in a coma for 2 weeks, and I was in the ICU for a month. When I did eventually wake up from my coma, I was paralyzed on my left side, so I couldn't move my left side. And kind of funny, the first language I spoke after I was able to speak out of my coma was Spanish. So I would only speak in Spanish, which is funny coming from me, the white boy, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. So then I had a medical flight up to Craig Hospital in Denver, Colorado, which is where they do spinal cord injury rehab and brain injury rehab and like TBIs, traumatic
Hmm.
brain injury. And so that's where I learned how to live again, right? So I learned how to walk again and how to talk in English again and how to do everything again, right? And um, that was a hard recovery
Hmm.
because for several different reasons. One is that I could remember like my memory of I couldn't remember the accident, thank God. And I still can't. And I couldn't remember necessarily maybe like a week before the accident, but I could still remember the fact that I was a nationally ranked cyclist, right?
Hmm.
That I was as a 16-year-old, I was ready to go start racing in Europe, and there was a high potential that I was about to get signed on to a semi-pro development team, which would feed me into an American professional cycling team. Um, I could remember that I was that capable, but I
Hmm.
couldn't get out of bed on my own, and I had to press a button for a nurse to come take me to the bathroom. And I mean, I was very weak on my left side,
Hmm.
and I mean, I had scars, and I wasn't really able to move, you know. So I remember those mornings. That was probably my first memory up at Craig Hospital. Was kind of waking up in a bed one morning and just being like, "Whoa," you know.
Hmm.
But also having the drive to get through it, because obviously I'm in this situation. My body knows what happened to me. I may not have consciously remembered what happened, but obviously my body
Hmm.
subconsciously knew what had happened. So it was just kind of the drive and the motivation. And um that's something that my dad actually says was very impactful, was when I was in the ICU still. um this is when I was kind of recently out of my coma. He asked me, since he was the deacon at my Catholic high school that I went to. He would give homilies on Mondays at our like school wide mass.
Mm.
And so he told me, it was like a Sunday night, and he told me, Nathan, I'm giving the homily tomorrow at school. Is there anything you want me to tell the students about how you're doing? And I wasn't talking at this point. So what they did is they put a whiteboard in front of me, and I don't remember this, so it's great for him to tell me. But they put a whiteboard in front of me, and I wrote, "Won't stop until better." And he said like that was pretty motivational to see me write that I wasn't really capable of doing much, but I was able to write that, and that just kind of
Mhm.
showed the drive, right? And the drive that's necessary, right? I mean, there's people who, like me, or even worse, have gone through physical trials or emotional trials or whatever the case may be that are just so impossible to endure.
Hmm.
But it's really complete trust in God and a, an earnest, just fortitude in this heart, that you
Hmm.
persevere through the pain. And that's what allows us success in anything, right? Like my grandma, for example, she had cancer and she was just devastatingly sick, but she was determined. She was determined to see her
Hmm.
grandchildren get married. And sure enough, she made it to my wedding 2 years ago. And I mean, it's just incredible. She's still doing very well. And
Hmm.
it's just miraculous to see how well she is doing. Given the fact that she was very sick with cancer, and so
Hmm.
it's the same sort of thing. I'm getting on a whole lot of, I could go on so many different tangents right now, but
Yeah,
it
definitely.
it really is all about that drive, and that
Hmm.
inner desire, because we all have that in our hearts, that we as humans, we all have the ability to be excellent,
Mm. Yeah,
or to
100%.
strive for our greatest success, right?
So with a lot of people, you'll hear a lot of stories. There will be like a young football player that gets in a car crash, or an Olympic athlete that has a career-ending injury or something like that. And these people will very quickly, and even outside of the athletic space, right? If somebody has a goal like, nationally ranked, or they're just super competitive in a certain field, and they basically build their identity around that thing, and then either they don't measure up, so they just don't meet the mark, and they don't get accepted to that college they thought they were going to go to, or yeah, they don't make it into a D1 school, something like that, or in your case, like, you are physically stopped from competing in the sport. What do you think was that? And obviously, you spoke to it with the faith a little bit, but could you go a little bit deeper on what it was specifically that kept you from getting up? Because I'm sure at certain points you were just sitting there and you were looking at your life and not being able to move as you used to be, and just being like, this is it. This is my life now.
Yeah. So are you kind of asking, what was my motivation to get out of bed each day?
Yeah. And did you feel like you had built your identity and your sense of worth around that thing? And if so,
Mm.
how did you change that? Or had you previously built up your sense of self-worth around something else? And if so, how can somebody that wants to be hyper competitive in a field not attach their sense of value or meaning in life from the outcome that they produce? Because that's always going to be somewhat out of our hands, right? No matter how good we are.
Yeah, that's a really good question, man. Um, yeah, great question. I think my entire life pretty much was focused on cycling.
Mm.
But I mean, I'm born and raised Catholic, right? And so I have always had a devout faith. Um, Obviously we all fall, right? We all have sin. we all
Hmm.
have we stray so far from the truth that we ought to live, right? So there
Hmm.
were definitely a lot of moments when I was trying to rebel or go out of hand, but I always had a relationship with our Lord that was, that was the most important thing to me at heart. And
Mm.
this is a good example. When I won the Tour of the Gila, I was with my team, and every night we were, having dinner together and everything. And every dinner before I ate, I would just do the sign of the cross, and pray over my meal, and then finish praying and eat.
Hmm.
None of my other teammates were religious in any regard, and I mean, a lot of them kind of gave me some grief for being Catholic. Um,
Yep.
but it was an opportunity for me to, be an example of my faith. And I've always held that to be my true core, right?
Mm.
What holds us at our core. And so I think in regard to your question, whether that be in sports, like if you have some sort of ability to go for a sport and then that kind of falls through, or whether that be whether that be in academics and that may fall through, or whether that be with your family. Maybe you're with your spouse, right? And you're trying to have a child, but you guys aren't able to have a child. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
your identity isn't necessarily in those, those things that could fail you, because
Mm-hmm.
everything could fail, right? Like everything that we do on this earth, whether it be a hobby, whether it be another person, whether it be a relationship, whether it be anything besides God,
Mm-hmm.
they all fail you, right? Or they all have the potential to. And I hate to sound pessimistic when I say that, but I think when you have your core be something that's unshakable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it doesn't necessarily matter what else happens. Obviously, I, as a competitive cyclist, my only goal and something that was incredibly achievable was becoming a professional cyclist and going and
Mm-hmm.
achieving success and being, the greatest American cyclist ever, right? That was what was possible and
Mm-hmm.
what I was shooting to attain. And I was doing everything necessary to get that done. Who knows what would have happened if it actually did happen? But I was working really hard to get there. When that all fell apart, like you said, it's one of those mornings where I woke up and I'm like, man, I can't do that. And that was actually the hardest part for me in the hospital, was when
Mm-hmm.
my neuropsychologist told me, Nathan, you just got to understand that you're lucky to be alive, very lucky. And you genuinely can't risk it again. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you get on the bike, you're going to crash again, because that's what happens when you race competitively. You crash, whether it be rare or not, you do crash. And if
Mm-hmm.
you have another bad crash, you're not going to be able to recover like you did now.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the hardest day for me in the hospital, because I mean my whole entire identity was in cycling, right? And so hearing that was really hard to hear, but it's also one of
Mm-hmm.
those things where you realize that yeah, my whole life shouldn't be based on something that is, it's not permanent, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so um I kind of beat around the bush with that question, man. I went all
No,
over the
no, that
place,
was
but
that was really good. And I think it
yeah, I mean, I
is.
think like a final thing to say, I guess, would just be that for anyone who's determined or who has a goal in mind in any regard, right? And for any end goal, do your best and strive your best and always work your best to achieve that goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I hate the term have a backup plan, because I never thought that was a good idea. Never have a backup plan. Work your
Mm-hmm.
butt off.
Burn the ships. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, to accomplish your goals, and don't try to worry about other things. Work hard to accomplish your
Mm-hmm.
goals. But then if something happens, there you go, something happens, so you gotta change the
Yeah.
goal, right?
Yeah. And I think a really important point to make that kind of piggybacks off of what you were saying about everything has the potential to fail. That in itself is not a justification for not trying. Because
Right.
I'll even hear this from I mean, heck, when I made the decision to drop out of school, I heard this from a lot of family members and friends and stuff. It's like, what if, what if, what if? You can do that all day long. Like no matter how safe your life is, and we do have the luxury of having relatively safe lives, living in a first world, 21st century country. Um, but there will always be things that can go wrong, and it's just a question of how much risk you're willing to tolerate and then what you can't. But it seems to me that the more you try to insulate yourself from any risk, as in like a detrimental side effect, you're also blocking off any um, really positive changes, right? Because like if you want to really, really start a business, but oh, your business might fail, the safest thing you can do is not make that bet. But then you're also guaranteed to never actually fulfill that dream. And then, when you're 50 or 60 or whatever, you're locked in a dead end job, you're probably supporting your family, but you're always looking backward and knowing I could have done that and I didn't. And I think that eats people alive. I mean,
Mhm.
like we were saying before we started recording, I wanted to do this podcast for years. One of my biggest regrets is the fact that I wanted to record a show with a grandfather of mine that was dying from leukemia, and now I will never have that chance because he passed, because I
Yeah.
dragged my feet on it, right? Um, and so like there's always a chance that something can go wrong, but there's also a chance it can go right. And the only way that you're really gonna find that out is if, like you're saying, you put in everything you possibly can on your end, so that if you fail, it's because it wasn't meant to be, not because of anything that you could have done better on your end. So I think
Yeah.
that's really important. So on the subject of your faith and how that's informed your worldview, obviously the recovery process, everything like that. How do you fit that into the I guess like the business world in your day-to-day life, being a parent, everything like that? Because it's very easy to, preach these things on the internet or social media, or uh, we see this in a lot of the, um, I guess like the intellectual Catholic circles, where people will talk a really big game, but then they don't
Mhm.
actually apply
They
any
don't
of
walk
that
the
to
walk,
life.
right? They talk the
Yeah,
talk, but they don't walk the
yeah,
bark. They're like chihuahuas, man.
it's not even that they're being dishonest, but that they're talking about courage and bravery and being a man and all these different things in the faith, but then you see them just functioning in society and they just behave like another person. So,
That is so true. It's one of those things where, do we truly trust in God, right?
mhm,
Like, have you taken a leap of faith? You're talking about this business thing, and there's so many people that I know that talk a big talk about being courageous and bold and all this stuff, but
mhm,
you work your 9 to 5, and then you're not going to be able to spend much time with your family. And I mean, it's not like everyone can be an entrepreneur. It's not like
yeah,
everyone can go um be successful in business, or be successful in anything
and
that's
to be clear,
outside of
that's
the
that's not a bad thing either. It's just people have different competencies and different strengths.
right. That's fine, right? And that's no, that's totally fine. And everyone has different competencies, right? And everyone has different levels of comfort and risk taking. But doing what you do in the daily life that you live, are you actively living your faith, right? Because um like faith and action, we ought to trust in the Lord. And this is perfectly resembled with Peter walking on the water, right? Is that
Hmm.
look at the faith he had, you know, that Jesus told him to come meet him on the water. And look at the faith he had, that he was able to, for what was it, like a couple steps, or maybe not even, but he at least did it for a few moments. And then he looked down and he lost faith.
Hmm.
But look at the faith he had, right? That in itself is the faith that we ought to have. Now, I'm not speaking this from a point of view as if I've accomplished it myself. I mean, definitely not. But I, but
Hmm.
I, I read this stuff and I study this stuff, and I try to live it to my best. That I mean, where is your faith taking you? Is your faith in action?
Hmm.
Is your faith in action, right? We ought to take leaps of faith, just to ensure that we trust in the Lord, and that also requires a lot of action on our part. But that first step into the water that Peter
Hmm.
took was utter and total faith, right? And he was walking on water. Then he looks down and boom, you fall. And of course,
Hmm.
God will always be there to save us, right? Thank the Lord, as a Catholic, for reconciliation and for God's eternal
Yes.
mercy and His grace. But but I mean, that was Jesus picking him out of the water, pulling him out of the
Hmm.
water. At least he tried, right? At least he took that step,
Hmm.
because so often do we not take the step, right? And then, I mean, of course, Jesus can save you in any regard, but it's harder to save you when you're not drowning because you took a bunch of leaps of faith, right?
Hmm.
Um, So yeah, I think that's big. And I man, like I said, I could keep babbling on about a lot of stuff. Something that I really a quote that I really respect is by Jordan Peterson. He said that we are morally obligated to do remarkable things, right? Like that is
Mm,
our moral obligation is to do remarkable things. And I think that is so true. And like I said, we need people to be consistent, right? And to
hmm.
be, doing what you do in the daily life to just keep food on the table and everything. But in every day you can make a decision to be remarkable at least one thing, whether that be remarkable in a relationship, right? You wake up and you love your wife more
Hmm.
today than you ever have, or you show her, or you do some things around the house that display to your family that like you're ride or die, right? It's like you were there for them and you're a
Hmm.
rock. Or let's say, for being in college, or for people that are, in their young 20s like us. I mean, you reach out to friends who you haven't spoken to in a while, and you be that voice to them. And I think you also asked me in how I do this with business. There's
Hmm.
several different ways you can take our faith in business. There's the active way, which, for example, I do some land transactions, buy and sell land from different landowners. And um, I was speaking with a lady today this past few weeks, who I put under contract, and her husband just passed away suddenly, and
Oh.
she is just a wreck. I mean, and I
Hmm.
feel so bad for her, but she's having a really hard time. And so the only thing I can really do is be there for her, right? So, like, yes, I am here to help her with her real estate because that's what I do. And also, that's what she needs. She needs some assistance with her real estate now that her husband's gone. Um, so that's
Hmm.
a ministry in itself. But I also just know that when I call her on the phone, talking to her, I mean, I'm almost like a therapist, right? Like, she just needs someone to talk to. And she was crying on the phone, and it's very sad. But that's where you can display God's love, right? So I told her I'd be praying for her, and for her husband's funeral is tomorrow. And so
Oh
I'm
wow.
praying for them at the time of the funeral. And I mentioned all that to her, right? And I mentioned, God and faith, and she corresponded well, right? She said that yes, he's in God's hands now and all of this. And so that's a way to display it actively, right? That you
Hmm.
actively vocalize, the greatness of God and his transcendence and his glory even in the hard times. Or what you can do is just be the example, right? It's what is this? How does the saying go? They will know you are Christians by your love.
Hmm.
And so what does that mean, right? That I've been in a lot of real estate deals where people are just crooked, and they're just selfish, and they're totally in it for the money, and they're crooked. And I've been screwed over countless times in real estate
Mm.
by just completely selfish, self-focused realtors and brokers. And I could go on a list of a whole lot of different things, and developers and all these things. But that's not, you don't let them drag you down, right? You
Hmm.
take that, and to not follow suit. But then I now interact with all of my clients, or with all of the people that I work with, all of my employees, all of my assistants, or all of my contractors, and I try to
Hmm.
be a light to them, right? Like, we're the light of the world. Why not let it shine, right? Like let us show God's
Yeah.
light and his love, even in a place where there's so much corruption, right?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And do you have any like rituals or routines or anything that you do, either like, every week or every day or something to kind of keep that correct frame? Because when you're in the trenches just doing the work, it's very easy to just laser focus in on that one thing. And it's like, okay, I'm here to make money, I'm here to support my family, and I'm just going to do the thing. So, how do you maintain that, um, I guess, like presence of mind and that focus on, um, I suppose, like longer term objectives and more amorphous, meaningful disciplines as opposed to just like in the moment, this is what I need to do. I'm going to do it and move on.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. So consistency is key
Hmm.
for everything, right? Um, so I really love it. Especially with the newborn, man. Consistency is vital. Like you have to have a consistent schedule with that guy.
Yeah.
Um, so every night, my wife and I we sing a song to him, and we tuck him in his bed, and we pray the same prayers every night. And then she and I say the same prayers before she and I fall asleep every night. And in the morning, I pray the same prayers every single morning.
Hmm.
Um, and that's with like our active prayer life, right? And there's so much more that goes into faith and goes into a prayer life
Hmm.
specifically, right? Like there's a lot of we ought to listen to the Lord as often as we talk his ear off. um, and so what I try to do is keep consistency in that regard. The thing that makes me fall apart sometimes is my dang phone, man. Like that is such a my phone is a distraction.
Yep.
Yeah. So my phone is a distraction wherein I could be on the grind, doing business, but instead I'm going through Instagram or something. And
Hmm.
that's toxic. Now, um, I'm trying to utilize Instagram as a way to, first of all, spread the Lord's word and also just build my business.
Hmm.
So I think that's the other end where if I am able to just control my addiction to the social media, then I can utilize it as an asset, right?
Hmm.
Um, or as a method to grow my business and further God's kingdom. Um, but sometimes it just distracts me, right? And that's
Hmm.
that's the key about long-term investments and long-term, not just investments of your capital, but investments of your time and your life, is that you should always have like a long-term goal, especially when you're young like us, young in our 20s.
Hmm.
I have In regard to capital investments, I have quite a few that are set up super long term, right? Like I'm not going to touch them for a while, but super long term, just compounding growth.
Hmm.
Um, and then I have long term business plans where, um, when things take place, I'm going to need to work really hard for a long time, but eventually they'll be rolling, right? And
Hmm.
um, there's just it's a lot of long-term planning, and that's kind of what you need to do, especially in our culture now, right? And that's what, as a guy, I mean a junior in college, I was getting ready to propose. That's
Hmm.
a crazy long-term investment, man. Like that's the biggest investment you can make. That's the biggest investment you can
Yeah.
make in your life. And I walked up to some of our friends, and I was talking to them. It was Charity, my wife. It was some of her friends, and so
Hmm.
I asked them, and I said, "Well, what do you girls think? I mean, I'm thinking that maybe towards the end of senior year, like once we graduate, I could propose to Charity." And they said, "What? Charity's Charity's expecting you to propose this summer." And I was like, "Whoa, this summer, how do I get ready for that?" Um, but then of course, then it all happened. We got engaged at the beginning of senior year, and now we're coming in on 2 years of marriage and a little baby. Can't believe
Hmm.
it, man. God's plan, right?
Yes.
Yeah, by God's grace, of course. And so that's of course, I mean, I've just got on another tangent, but
Hmm.
that's long term, right? That you gotta think long term about all the relationships you hold, about all of the people you get involved with, about the households you join, right? I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
that was something that freshman year, right? Me and Mike and Luke and all the boys, we were just kind of saying, listen, we've been to a lot of households, but none of them just feel like the household that we need, you know? So we
Mm-hmm.
said, why don't we just start one? And then, of course, the rest is history.
Mm-hmm.
But by God's grace, we were able to start up DOP, and by God's grace, once again, look at how incredible DOP has grown, and
Mm-hmm.
it is just so incredible to be able to see something like that take place for the greater glory of God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's we are His instruments, right?
Yeah, yeah, and
So
I'm so glad you brought up household because this is something else I wanted to really dive into, which is the well, I guess we can start with a little bit of a preface, just what you see being the significance of masculine friendships because I think of
mm,
all the areas in society that are suffering, I think that is the most prominent and it's also having the most negative effects because you have guys that are growing up, they feel super isolated just, through elementary, middle, high school into college. Maybe you make some friends at work or some people in your class or something, but they're more associations of convenience. It's not like you've actually found aligned values or anything that endures there. And then, so I guess my question is, um, I guess if we just start with the basics, how has finding like-minded men impacted your life? And if we wipe the slate clean, if there's somebody out there, because I'm giving a lot of like prefacing to this, but I think this is really important.
mhm.
Obviously, at Franciscan, we were both blessed with a good environment. A lot of guys that probably don't measure up to what we think men should, but a lot of really solid men as well. And so we're blessed to have these environments where there are like-minded people and things like that. But with specifically with reference to your life being where it is now, obviously post college, people are starting to spread out across the country, do different things, build their own families. Um, how do you approach cultivating masculine friendships, and what impact has that had on your life up until this point?
Yeah, great question. The the ability we had at Franciscan to make just long-term, lifelong friendships with,
Unrivaled.
I mean, incredible men. Yeah, just so good. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really funny because that's so true. When I got to Franciscan, I mean, it's just my sister and I growing up, right? I didn't have any brothers,
Mm-hmm.
or even multiple sisters. I just had it was just my sister and I. Um, and so I wasn't used to, the the real pushiness, to
Mm-hmm.
get each other to be the men that we need to be, right? I never really had someone my age that I necessarily grew up with that would just, push me to be the man that I needed to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Granted, I like my parents or maybe some other adults, but no one my age, right? And no
Not the peer
one,
group, yeah.
not the peer group. Because your friends, I mean, going to high school, your friends are just friends. You just do a bunch of dumb stuff together, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So when I got to Franciscan, I was very set aback by the forthright, just aggressive push to be a man that I was getting from some of the guys, and my Luke Pippa was my roommate for the first part of
Mm-hmm.
second part of freshman year, second semester. And man, he would push me to be the man that I needed to be. And I did
Yep.
not want to hear it sometimes. I did not want to hear it sometimes because I was just having fun being a crazy freshman, you know, just doing a bunch of outrageous
The
things.
freshman
And
antics, I remember them well.
oh yeah, oh yeah. But Pip would push me to be better, you know, and
Hmm.
I got mad, man. I seriously did. I was mad and I got a little out of hand. And then of course we would all DOP in the beginning. Our household was just a group of guys who had no idea what they were doing. We were all just young freshmen trying to figure out what the heck to do.
Hmm.
Um, and we all knew the end goal, right? We all knew the end goal was to be masculine men that were just well diversified, well-rounded men who were strong and devout Catholics. And we just that was the goal. But
Hmm.
we were all just ignorant freshmen who were just making mistakes every single day.
Hmm.
um and so we would always be messing up all the time, and then we would get mad at each other for messing up, and then we wouldn't know what to do because we all keep messing up and making mistakes. And so we would like start we tried to figure out if we should start punishing each other, like doing physical exercise to punish
Yeah.
when we fail in different aspects, or if we make bad decisions. But then we all just started bashing heads, and it was kind of chaos.
Hmm.
But the knots worked themselves out, and eventually we got to where we were once we graduated, and look at where DOP is now, right?
Hmm.
Like you said, you can't be married to the past, so there's great adaptations that come along. And I think that there's a lot to learn through different relationships that you hold.
Hmm.
But it's so rare in this lifetime to be able to have a genuinely masculine, militantly masculine man, as Kyle says, right?
Hmm.
Um, who you can rely on and trust in as a friend and a brother, right? And that's very
Hmm.
rare to find that. And we all can see that now, after graduation.
Yeah.
That I have yet I've made a lot of really good friends since I've graduated. And but I can probably count on one hand how many of those friends or connections in my network are genuinely good, strong men who are morally sound and also push themselves to become better, right?
Hmm.
Like we're morally obligated to do remarkable things. Remember, I'll bring that up again. So there's only a few men that I've met that could manifest that um, moral obligation to achieve.
Hmm.
I mean, anything remarkable. Um, so I think that's something that they really you should never take for granted if you do have those men in your life, and you ought to be very particular when you're choosing your friends,
Hmm.
or your network, or whoever you are surrounding yourself with. Because my dad always told me when I was growing up, he said, "Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future."
Yep.
And I think it's so true. It
So
is
true.
incredibly true. Whether that be you're surrounding yourself with people who are, incredibly successful in business, who are incredibly wise with their investments, with their capital
Hmm.
investments, whether that be people who are incredibly sound in their moral life, whether that be people who
Hmm.
are incredibly Catholic and very well read on what the truth, the Bible and the Catechism. And so it really is important that there should be at least several people in every category of your life that are just rock solid. And
Hmm.
praise God, man, praise God that we have the men that we have in our lives, all of our
Yeah.
household brothers,
Agreed.
because they still hold me up to who I ought to be, even though I
Hmm.
never see them. And I'll tell you what, I miss all the boys so much, man. I miss you so much. But Luke Pippa is my son's godfather now, so
Yep.
it's really cool to be able to it's really cool to be able to to be alongside a brother in faith that he and I both were holding each other to higher standards, while we were growing up in college.
Hmm.
And now we can see the other side, right? Now that we're living the life.
Yeah. And so the natural question that derives from all this is somebody says, okay, well, Nate, that sounds all well and good, but I don't have those opportunities in my life. I'm a big believer in creating your own luck. So I think, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, there's not any like-minded men around me, or something you also see as a lot of modern men are really disillusioned when it comes to women, and they're like, oh, there are no good women left, and I have no chance whatsoever. Or what would be another in like a career space? It's like, well, I'm stuck here. I can't do anything. Like you said earlier, you have to try as hard as you can. And so I think that there is a lot to be said for being the change you want to see in the world and making things happen. I wanted to start a men's group, back home, kind of in the same vein as DOP, right? So younger guys holding each other accountable, stuff like that. There wasn't anything at the parish for that, so I called up some friends of mine and I said, "Hey, do you want to get this going?" And so we have it going. We actually have a meeting tomorrow morning, incidentally. But so yeah, so all that is to say, I think it's very important to take initiative and take action and actually create the opportunities for other people, because very often I find there are people around you that are probably looking for the same things that you are, and you just aren't aware of each other's presence. So if you have something that people can look at and say like, oh, I can go do that thing. Um, I think that's a very productive way to go about kind of finding those like-minded people, obviously putting yourselves in situations where you're going to meet aligned people. So, um, church, volunteer work, um, going to the gym, especially something like a martial arts gym. So you have a more kind of class dynamic and more connections with people. But would you add anything to that for like somebody that says, okay, well, Nate, I don't have any friends, I don't have a network or anything established. What would you say would be that like first two or three steps that they should take to start finding good men and then bringing them into their life more to hold them accountable and push them to be better and everything that you just mentioned?
Yeah, man. I've got another quote for you.
Hmm.
This one's from Robert Kiyosaki.
Oh
Um,
yes, rich dad, poor dad.
yeah, he says, luck is created just as money is.
Hmm.
So go create your own luck. Now, this is obviously, he wrote it in regard to monetary
Of
considerations,
course.
right? Like yeah, so he's talking about that in regard to investments and all of this. But I take that into every step of life. So
Hmm.
let's think about that. Sure, in work, right? In regard to maybe yes, something in regard to monetary. So you say luck is created just as money is. So you mentioned, you take that in your job. Well, if you're working a job that you hate, man, and it's just dragging you down, and it causes you to go home and not interact well with your family, or maybe it's taking time away from your family, or whatever the case may be, or maybe it's you're working from home and you just are lazy, or
Hmm.
maybe you're finding yourself just trapped in different addictions, or laziness in particular. Well, you're creating your own luck, right? You
Hmm.
continue to do that, continue to do that job. You continue to be around those same people. You continue to be with the people that work with you, that are bringing you down from who you could be. Oh, you're creating your own luck, right?
Hmm.
So, sure, maybe take a leap of faith. Yes, that's very uncomfortable, but take a leap of faith. Go be great, right? Go make that remarkable. Go make that achieve that moral obligation to be
Hmm.
remarkable, right? I keep saying all this, but it's you
Yeah.
create your own luck. So that's in regard to your work, right? Then you asked me in regard to girls, or be in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You create your own luck, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's same sort of thing. Get involved with a lot of groups, be involved with the right type of group wherein you want to find
Mm-hmm.
someone who you long to be with, right? So maybe you're getting involved with people from church, maybe you're getting involved with people from a certain networking group or a certain active group, like you're going on hikes or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it may be. Well, surround yourself with women or men who you long to be with, and you'll create your own luck, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then how do you create your own luck in regard to, living your faith, being active in your faith?
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you make decisions that um resemble our faith? Do you surround yourself with people who help you make morally sound decisions? Do you surround yourself with environments that
Mm-hmm.
assist you in making morally sound decisions?
So basically, what you're saying is make it as easy as possible for life to give you that thing that you're looking for, so that there's no upset, nothing that you're doing that's like out of integrity with that goal, and just basically like standing yourself in the middle and saying, "Here I am."
Right. Yeah.
Gotcha. Awesome. And one thing I also want to touch on is, you've mentioned a couple times, obviously you're married, you have a son, a beautiful young family. So, and I've had the privilege already of, interviewing several people that have started families, much younger than when typically would. Because most people think of like, oh, I'll get around to that when it happens. But,
Mm.
I've talked with a lot of people that have gotten married at the beginning of the journey and, like committed, I want to take this journey with this person throughout the entire, like your entire lifespan as opposed to partway through or something. So, one thing I'm always very curious to hear is what made you so certain that Charity was the right woman for you at such a young age?
Oh gosh. Big question, man.
That's
um
what I'm here for.
there it is. um I think before I get into the question about, how I knew it was charity,
Hmm.
something I want to touch on, which you kind of touched on in your question, was the fact that I'm young. I'm in my early 20s, mid 20s, and we're married. We have a kid, and look at all this, right? So this goes back to my accident. Something I learned clearly from my life and my life story that I would love to share with all of your listeners or anyone I can. I've given a lot of talks to a lot of different groups about this,
Hmm.
that tomorrow's never promised, right? Tomorrow's never promised. And so make the most of today and live today like it's your last. Now, I'm not saying go, spend money in the lottery or go buy a Lamborghini or go do something crazy. Um,
Hmm.
but live it like it is your last day, hoping that tomorrow will come, right?
Hmm.
So you need to plan, or hoping that, who knows, 10 years away from today comes. So make long-term plans, but live each day, make decisions as if, right, it is our last day, because you never know, right? We never know. I the day I woke up and I got on my bike to train with my team, definitely wouldn't have told you it would have been my last
Hmm.
day. And it should have been. Like I was reportedly dead, right? Um and so that's something to take that into consideration, is live it all like it's your last, because I always wanted to have a family. And so
Hmm.
just make a fan, just get married and have a family. And I always wanted to start a company. And so I started taking the steps senior year of college to start a company. And I would talk about it as a joke with some friends sometimes, but then eventually I was thinking, no, we should do this.
Hmm.
Same thing with the household. We were making jokes about making the household, but why not, right? Why not do
Hmm.
it? why not do it? So we made the household, and then I started my company, and then I got married, and it's all these things where if you have a goal, just get it done. Like just figure out
Mm-hmm.
how to do it and get it done, because it's possible. Everyone's done it. So many, no one's making anything new up.
Mm-hmm.
No, like everyone, there's been so many incredible inventors and inventions in the past. No one's making anything up anymore. You just got to figure out how to do it, how to start a company, how to start a family,
Yeah.
how to do anything, and boom, get it done. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to take a lot of work and it's going to be really hard, but just get it done. That's my little spiel for you on that. Now let me talk to you about Charity, my beautiful bride. um, this was crazy, man. So I met Charity. Um, I met Charity freshman year, maybe like the second day of school, and
Mm-hmm.
we went to a school, Franciscan University, that favored men. And when I say that, that means there were more women than men. So there was,
That's, I think, pretty typical for most colleges.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So there was a lot of great opportunities to meet a bunch of beautiful Catholic women.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the case. I met a lot of beautiful Catholic women. And it was great, but there was just, man, it was crazy. Now I'm not telling you love at first sight. That's a whole thing that's just ridiculous. I don't that's
Soulmates.
the come on, don't give me that. Do not give me that. But I'm telling you that I met Charity, and that's the first thing. Her name is Charity. So talk about an alley oop from God, right? He said her name means love. Here you
Mm-hmm.
go.
Mm.
Um, and so I met her, and I can't tell you, I just thought, wow, she is just the dream. So then I went back to my dorm that night, and I was talking with my friend Alex, and I told him, man, there's this girl that I met, her name's Charity. Whew. Man, I would love to get to know her some more. And
Mm-hmm.
so then for the entirety of the first semester of freshman year, I would constantly hit her up, and she would constantly ignore me. um, and pass me up, and then I'd occasionally bump into her, and we would talk. But then eventually,
That's how it goes.
um, yeah, eventually I knew that I really wanted to take her out on a date. So I invited her and her best friend to go out on a date together, because that that's how the girls do it, man. You know
Mm-hmm.
that. So I took her and her best friend out on a date and bought them both dinner. And so I was playing chess, not checkers, man. You
Oh
gotta
yeah.
you gotta know where you
All
gotta
the
know where to
angles.
place your. Yep, that's right. Um, and and then we just kept getting closer, kept getting closer, and she was genuinely one of my best friends. First, towards the end of the first semester of freshman year, we were hanging out a lot, and that's how, in my opinion, a relationship ought to be, right? You
Mm-hmm.
should marry your best friend, because you're gonna be together forever. And granted, we're only 2 years in. I say that with quotation marks. So we're
Yeah.
still technically in what some could argue is the quote unquote honeymoon phase. But I'm telling you, we've gone through a lot already in these two
Mm-hmm.
years, and boom, we already have a baby. And so there's a lot that we need to work together on. But going back to the story, I asked her out, and she eventually was crazy enough to say yes. And we were dating, and went through it, and going through everything you go through as you're dating somebody. And
Mm-hmm.
then I kind of gave you the story of how I was informed that I needed to propose her far before I thought I needed
Yeah.
to. But um, in answer to your question about her being, how I knew that was her, I think the time frame I can tell you when I knew that I wanted to marry her. Um, it was actually during when COVID hit, when the Rona was striking the world.
Oh no.
And so we school was canceled. So we were on spring break and I was back home for spring break. She was up in
Uh-huh.
New Jersey with some friends for spring break. Oregon was one of the high, Oregon is where she lived with her family. And Oregon was one of the highest rates of COVID
Mm.
recorded. And we can get into so many things on this topic, but I'm not going to.
And
Now,
we can sum it up in one word: egregious.
the boy, that's pretty much what you can say. Um, so she was debating when she was in New Jersey whether she was going to go home to Oregon, where all of her family members had it,
Mm.
um, and like it was rampant in Oregon, or what else she would do, like if she was going to stay in New Jersey or anything else. So that's when the semester was called off. And so I was staying with my parents and I said, hey, can we have Charity come by? Because actually, no, it wasn't. The semester wasn't called off yet. It was only supposed to be a 1 week break.
Mm.
So I told my parents, I was like, hey, can we have Charity swing by for the last week before we have to go back to school? And they're like, sure, just have her over. So Charity was staying in my sister's room. My sister was at college at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So she was staying in my sister's room and I was staying in my room, and my parents were obviously, this was their house.
Moderating,
Um,
yes.
yeah. And so, but then, the week passes by and we get an email saying, hey, folks, semester's called off. So we were like, what's going on now? So she actually stayed with my family for the remainder of the semester. And that
Wow.
was really great because we kind of got to establish a routine, wherein she's a nurse, so she was in nursing school, which means she had to really spend time focusing on her studies.
Mm-hmm.
um, and then me as a business major, I didn't
Oh
wasn't really
yeah.
paying attention to anything. um, but she would be on her routine with her classes and her studying, and I would be on my semi routine, mostly just with exercise, because I would rather be running or riding my bike than be attempting to study business, because I can get into a whole nother spiel about that, but that's another podcast.
Based.
um
That'll be part two. That'll be part two.
yeah, that'll be part 2, 3, 4, and 5. um but so we kind of were setting up routines. We were just having a lot of fun together, and we were always with each other, right? Because no one was really hanging out. There was no get-togethers with large groups of people, so it was my parents and Charity and I, and we were just kind of a little family. We would have family dinners every night,
Mm-hmm.
and we were kind of getting into a daily routine. And that was kind of when I thought to myself, you know what, I could see myself doing life with her. Now, this is a very unique opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of people get to semi live with their girlfriend before they consider proposing to her.
Mm-hmm.
um, so that's something where it's a very unique
Mm-hmm.
opportunity that
But
Charity and
what
I got
what
to.
were the things during that period that you saw where you were like, I can work with this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's kind of where I was going, was how someone else would kind of run the due diligence, and
Mm-hmm.
consider things, regardless of how often you get to see your girlfriend or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I saw in her was very motherly tendencies,
Mm.
which is funny that she was consistent, and you need consistency. Like I said, we have to be consistent with our baby. Um,
Mm-hmm.
she had a very devout prayer life too. I've always been, in love with her prayer life, and she's taught me a lot
Mm-hmm.
about prayer, and that's something that I'm grateful we have together. Um, I One big thing for me was her level of activity, like how active she was, because I love being outdoors, everything outdoors. I love
Mm-hmm.
hiking, I love running, I love biking, I love doing anything outdoors. And so I would bring her on long bike rides with me, and she just did it, man. Like she just would go for long bike rides with me on the bike path in New Mexico, and we would just ride for a long time, and she would just get through it, man. It's so cool. And we would go for really long hikes because she's from Oregon, and
Uh-huh.
so she's not used to the high elevation. But we were in New Mexico, and she was doing these really long hikes, and she would lead the group. Like she would just take off and set the
Mm.
pace and lead the group. And I thought, there we go. That's pretty cool. So her because she was super active, and that was one of the top things for me, because she had a strong faith, because she had those motherly tendencies, because she was a nurse, she was going to be a nurse. I always
Hmm.
knew I wanted to marry a nurse because nurses just have that natural ability to raise a child, right? Like
Oh
medically
man.
and
Yeah.
physically and all that. So she just kind of she checked all the boxes for me. And I don't know how I was able to check a few of hers off, but thanks be to God.
Hmm. Amen to that.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And so kind of the natural reaction that some people would have to, proposing at the end of college or earlier is like, Nate, you just graduated, you're probably, 200K in debt, you don't have a steady career or any sort of path or direction established, or like, are you insane? What are you doing? So let's get into the business side of things and talk a little bit, because you mentioned several times throughout this conversation you're a very driven person, and it was always kind of funny to see the other guys joking, because occasionally they would have a get together and you would be just off hustling, doing your own thing and getting yourself set up. And like, obviously we all had massive respect for it, because like that was one of the pillars of the household is fortitude, right? So we love to see that and just getting after it. But at the same time, it was like, dang, okay, like he's getting after it. So in that time where you were setting yourself up to even be in a position to be able to propose, um, what did you do to establish yourself?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big question.
Hmm.
Um, it's all long-term investments. That's just,
Mm,
I'll keep going back to that long-term planning, right? I mean, I could say it again that tomorrow's never promised, but we ought to prepare for tomorrow like it's going to be here, right?
hmm.
um, so a lot of long-term investments. So um, I knew that I needed to plan long-term. Where it started off is I'm a hustler myself, if we're going to call it that, right?
Hmm.
That's what I like to tell people. I was kind of talking to you earlier about how I fired my broker
Yeah.
for my multifamily right now because he was just lazy, and I hired a big time hustler, and he is on the grind to help me, close off on my properties and um, assist me
Hmm.
with any investments for real estate. And so
Hmm.
you got to just do that, right? You got to offload the lazy or the weak, and you got to just do due diligence and find the people who are going to work. So I knew that because of my work ethic, and I can thank my mom for this one. My mom has an incredible work ethic. She's just a workhorse, man. That I always saw that from her. Um, she was definitely a role model for me in that, and so I've just been kind of a workhorse forever. So I was working with a real estate investment firm junior year when I got the news that I needed to propose to charity. So I was working constantly because
Hmm.
I knew that I needed to start making that dough to get the ring, and then also start setting up savings as well as long-term investments for our family, because I knew that was my new vocation. Obviously, I'm going to be a husband and a dad. So I need to start setting up for that.
Hmm.
So I was just on the grind junior year, man. I was working hard for this real estate investment company. And then I was working really hard for them. And then that summer, I went to go work in person with them in New Jersey.
Mm.
And the CEO actually, he let me go that summer, but he told me, Nathan, I think you have the potential to go start something on your own. and I'd rather you do that. So we're letting you go. And I thought, all right, cool, but also like that's really stressful. So then I thought, okay, well, what's next? So I did, of course, get some other jobs, just some other W-2 jobs just to start. Same sort of thing, constantly working because I knew I needed to save
Hmm.
up money and save a lot of cash and invest a portion of my capital into long-term investments so that I could have long-term for my family as well as, have that cash for our wedding, as well as for the ring, as well as for everything, in the moment.
Hmm.
So it was a lot of work. I was constantly working. But while I was working, I was actually, one of my jobs was at Home Depot. And while I was
Oh,
working at Home Depot, I would talk to some of my coworkers and I would tell them that I was the owner of a real estate company. And I
and
would
they
just
said,
kind
"Why
of,
are you here?"
right, that they'd be like, what? Yeah, what are you doing here? And I said, oh, I just have to make some extra cash. But I was speaking that into existence, right? And
Hmm.
then that semester when I went back to school, it was fun. I was actually out bowling with a bunch of friends, and my friend Tim and I were getting some beers at the bar where we were bowling, and
Hmm.
I leaned over to someone who was sitting next to me at the bar, and I told him, "Yeah, man, I'm an owner of a multifamily real estate investment company." And he was like, "Oh, no way." And so I told him all about the business plan for it. I obviously didn't own a real estate company at the time,
Uh-huh.
but I was trying to speak it all into existence, and then I was doing all the due diligence to study it while I was also working as much as I could. So I was working a job at school, and then I was working side hustles. I was doing side gigs. I was
Hmm.
doing everything I could to save up money, save, work. Um, and then eventually I happened upon an investment and I thought I can probably make this work. Talked to some good lenders, boom, made it happen and started up my multifamily company. And that's what I've been doing. And then I'm also doing a lot of work. I'm also partnering with a friend of mine who started up a land transaction company about a year ago. So I'm working with him. I'm the
Mm.
head of sales for that company. And um, that's kind of my day job, is working with him. And then my side hustle now is my multifamily, but that
Hmm.
gets into a whole nother podcast. Like I said,
Yeah.
we could cover so many podcasts.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you want to just start a separate show at this point, call it good.
Deal, yeah, deal.
Yeah, one thing I once heard about real estate, and it's, one of those things, if you're like in the entrepreneur space, it's like you probably want to be in real estate at some point, or you want to find something that has a similar effect. Um, One thing that I've heard is that once you learn how to put the deals together, the money just kind of appears. Has that been your experience?
Yes and no. Yes, in the fact that you're like the quarterback. I mean, that's what another long-term goal I have is to start up a development company. So here, now I'm
Hmm.
going to speak this one into existence.
All
Here we
right.
go. Boom.
I'm here for it. Let's go.
Um, so to start up a development company, and the reason I say that is because I would be the quarterback, right? So I'm calling all the shots and I'm directing people to do what they ought to do in the
Hmm.
development of a property. Um, and they're all licensed to do it, right? So I'll direct people to acquire the land and do due diligence on the land, and then I'll direct the plumbers to go in and do the plumbing, and then I'll direct the construction to do the construction, and I'll direct the city people to do the zoning. And there's just a whole lot of different things to go into development.
Hmm.
That's a whole nother podcast. Let's do another one. But it's all about, running the quarterback position and
Yeah.
putting your pieces in the right spots. Same sort of things with real estate transactions. Everyone wants your deal to work.
Hmm.
Everyone wants your deal to work if you're buying land or a property, and or selling land or a property. You have the buyer you have the seller who wants to sell the land. You have the seller's broker who wants to sell the land because he's making money. You
Hmm.
have the buyer who wants to buy the property or the land. You have the buyer's agent who wants to buy the land because he's going to make money. Now you have the lender who wants to lend the money because he's going to make money. You have the inspector who's going to inspect the property because he's going to make money. That's a
Mm-hmm.
whole nother podcast because inspectors are thieves and crooks, and I could get into that on another topic, but whatever. You have everyone. You have the appraiser who's going to do
Mm-hmm.
his job, and they're all thieves and crooks too. So we'll talk about that later. And then you have, people with the city. You have all these different portions of a real estate deal that all work together, and they all want the deal to happen. The
Mm.
biggest one is the lender. I love my lenders, man, because that's how the American economy is built, is on debt and
Mm-hmm.
leverage. And so I just love it because you make it real. And debt and leverage, that's how the American dollar is built, especially when Nixon took it off the gold, the
Mm-hmm.
gold standard. So it's no longer backed by gold. Um, real estate is what it says. It's real.
Mm-hmm.
So let's use that debt and leverage to buy more real estate, because it'll make more quote unquote money for all of the brokers, all of the lenders, all of the everyone. But then you get your hands on a real estate, right? And then you can rent that out and your tenants pay it off. That's the whole deal with multifamily.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of other stuff that goes into it and a lot of chaos, because that's the reason I kind of want to get out of multifamily. But
Mm-hmm.
these are so many podcasts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, but that was a pretty good overview. And definitely I get what you're saying with like being the quarterback and being the person that just takes all the components that already exists and then structuring them in a way to get to that end result. Um,
mhm.
so if we tie things back to, you know, family life and, you know, getting started as a husband and a father and just figuring out what this whole thing is, I'm really curious, what did you expect? What were you right about and wrong about in that? And then what did you not expect in, getting married and the couple of years since then?
Yeah. Something I did not expect. Charity and I are both big time extroverts. So
Mm,
we just talk, 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 talk all day long. One thing I did not expect was for our biggest difficulty in marriage to be communication.
mm,
When we first got married, the first several months, you got to figure out how to live with your spouse.
mm-hmm,
And having Charity be very determined, and very alpha, and having me be very determined and very alpha
uh-huh.
is great. It's so good. We match each other on that. But of course, we got to figure out how to live with each other.
Yep.
So that was big, but a lot of self realization in that, a lot of a lot of learning together,
Mm,
and you realize that you're just a team, and I just say that with so much joy in my heart, because yeah, we did a little bit of bickering and back and forth, at least in the
mm-hmm,
beginning, because that's what is probably going to happen, because you have to merge two lives together. Your entire life up until you get married, you've only been living for yourself. So you hold your
yeah.
standards, whether that be very high standards, very mediocre standards, or very low standards. You hold those standards for yourself. When you unite your life to another, you got to merge your standards, whether those be very high standards, very mediocre standards, or very low standards in any regard, whether that be cleaning
Mm-hmm,
the house, whether that be doing the laundry, whether that be doing the dishes, whether that be who's in charge of cooking, whether that be, she's a nurse, so she would be working frequently. And I do real estate, so I'm home a lot, because I kind of work from home.
mm-hmm.
And so I was cooking all the time. I was making all these dinners for us. I was like, man, I'm the husband. He's like, what? I didn't think I was going to be cooking all the time. I thought this was like a
Uh-huh.
team effort type of thing. Which of course then when she wasn't working, she would make the most delicious dinners with
Yep.
me and I can't ever complain. But
And you
I'm
say,
just a
why did you
drama.
let me do this?
Yeah, just a drama guy at that. So there was so much self-realization
Uh-huh.
in marriage, and a lot of self-denial, but man, I was just so blessed. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is everything I've longed for. We have our little boy, my little son, who's just happy and healthy
Yep.
and growing. And we praise
That's
God. We thank
beautiful, man.
him. We thank him every day for our son, for his health, for his joy,
Mm-hmm.
and all of his funny little things. Being a 4 or 5 month old now, he's just funny.
Mm-hmm.
And it is really funny because Charity and I maybe would say comments that were intended to be sarcastic or something when we were first married, and then we would start getting our feathers ruffled
Oh
and
yeah.
getting a little feisty and mad about it. But now we just say stuff out of pocket and just offhand at any time, and we kind of just joke about it because we're married. Nothing's
Uh-huh.
nothing's
You've
you
gotten
can't
used
take
to it.
anything too
Yeah.
seriously, right? So
Yeah.
we're just having it's just amazing. So there's a lot of learning, but
Mm-hmm.
that's for anything, and so that's pretty much how I would answer the wedding question in regard to what I was not expecting. Um, I would say to not have expectations when you're going into marriage,
Mm.
because like yes, hold yourself personally to expectations. And I myself, as I'm sure you and a lot of the boys that we are friends with, hold the standards or expectations very high for
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, right? And I'm not saying to hold lower standards for your relationship with your bride or for your bride or for your family at all. I'm just saying don't hold expectations because you never know, right? Like you never know. My little son blows out a diaper when we're on our way to church, so we have to show up late to church, which is my least favorite thing to do. But the kids just pooping his diaper. I mean, we got to be late, right?
Uh-huh.
Like you can't have expectations that you're ever going to be on time to anything when you have a kid. And same sort of thing with being married. Like you
Yeah.
can't. Sometimes you have to adjust because you're now living two lives instead of one, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really powerful stuff, man. So to kind of wrap things up and bring everything to a head here,
Mhm.
what does it mean to you to be a man?
Man, Gabe, you're hitting me with some big questions tonight.
That's what I do here, man.
So, what does it mean to me to be a man?
Mm-hmm.
I just heard this song. I don't know who it's by. It's some country singer. It's called Tough. And it's about a dad teaching his son how to be tough. And, the first verse goes through you're riding your bike and you're having fun, but then you fall and you scrape your knee, but you get up. You don't just lay on the ground and cry. You get up because you're tough. And then
Mm-hmm.
same sort of thing. You're being tough is like playing guitar with your grandpa for the last time, not knowing it's going to be your last time, and then waking up the next day realizing that you're never going to be able to play guitar with your grandpa again. And it's okay, you can have emotions and you cry at that because that's sad, but you stay tough, right? You don't let that change who you are. You don't let that change
Mm-hmm.
anything. So that it's a very sweet, young innocent song for little boys. And I love that, especially being the dad of a son now. I love being able to have that opportunity and see that, manifest itself.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in any regard for any guy or man in this world is that's we ought to be consistent, that life's going to throw a lot of stuff at you. Maybe you're going to get hit by a car and almost lose your life. Maybe you're going to lose your grandpa. Maybe you're going to fall off your bike and rub your knee. Not get hit by a car,
Mm-hmm.
but fall off your bike and rub your knee. Maybe you're going to fail a class. Maybe you're going to maybe you're going to encounter a lot of emotional trial. Maybe you're going to encounter really difficult financial
I
situations
mean,
where you're
you add
struggling.
enough possibilities to that, suddenly it's not a maybe because one of those is going to happen.
Yeah, like, and it does happen. I mean, this is it all is it's gonna happen, right? You're the flood is gonna come. But I love
Hmm.
this. Jordan Peterson also says this one. The flood is gonna come, right? But we need to be Noah needs to be our model,
Hmm.
because when the floods come, are you prepared? Like, do you have your boat, and um are you ready to captain it?
Mm. Yeah, don't
Or
build the boat while it's raining.
right, or are you ill prepared?
Hmm.
So we ought to always have that boat, and we have to always be able to captain it, because the flood is going to come. Hate to
Hmm.
say it, but the flood is going to come. So what does it mean to be a man? It means to have your ship built and be able to captain it, you
Hmm.
know? And that is so incredible. And it's such an incredible opportunity. Wow, how amazing is that we have that opportunity, right?
Hmm.
And that's what society is really starting to take a toll on, that because our culture is so focused on comfort and selfish tendencies. So yeah, of course there's going to be a lot of guys that would rather sit around and eat whatever they want to, and
Hmm.
just, work from their laptop and not do much, because that's comfortable, man. That's really comfortable, and it feels good.
Hmm.
And anything that feels good. Yeah, let's do that. But how incredible is it to be tempted by those natural tendencies to long for comfort like that, but know that we're called to such a higher power,
Hmm.
such a higher power. That's what being a man is. I mean, to me, right?
Hmm. Amazing, man. Beautiful. So you've got the Testament real estate page, you've got the Happy Sunday brand going on. Do you have any other places people can check out, any projects, anything like that going on?
Yeah. So I have my LinkedIn, which is where I do a lot of business stuff. It's been a little quiet lately because I've just been slammed with a lot
Life.
of stuff going on.
Hmm.
But I do have my LinkedIn, and then I have my Testament Real Estate Instagram. So both of those I'm posting videos to, for real estate, and I need to get back to that. Thanks for reminding
Hmm.
me. And then I have Happy Sunday. That's what I do. That's my podcast on Sundays, or not podcast. That's my little 1 minute
Synopsis.
30
Yeah.
second videos. Just, I typically it's a little short reflection on one of the daily readings during,
Hmm.
daily mass during that past week, or maybe even on the gospel that Sunday. um
Hmm.
just, they're nothing too crazy. It's just me giving a little reflection on some gospel or some readings. So that's Happy Sunday 116, because of Romans 1:16, which is, for I am not ashamed of
Mm.
the gospel. Um,
Oh, nice.
yeah, so that's on Instagram. And Gabe, I started recording a podcast with my friend JT down in Texas, but then, man, life just took a hold of both of us. We both just got slammed with a bunch of new investments, a bunch of work. He's starting an insurance firm.
Hmm.
I was in the midst of starting up a development and doing some other investment work. And so we just kind of fell off with our podcast.
Hmm.
But soon I will be starting a podcast with him, which will be called What's Good Today. It'll be just kind of covering a lot.
Mm.
Likewise, I'm going to be starting a podcast myself, probably with some priests. I'm just going to host different priests on it, and
Oh,
it's going to
awesome.
be um, it's going to be called Made for Greatness, because of JP2, who said we were not
JP2's
made
quote,
for.
yes, we're not made
Yes,
for
sir.
comfort, we are made for greatness.
We were not made for comfort. We were made
Amen
for
to that.
greatness. So then how do we achieve greatness in our daily life, right? Like,
Hmm.
that'll just be kind of a focus on that. And also, I was up in, well, when my wife and I at Fort Worth, parishioners at St. Patrick's Cathedral, and the priest there, Father John Roberts, man, just such an incredible, inspirational man, the wisest man I've ever met. And his homilies are just incredible. So I asked him if I could share some of his homilies, and he said that we could do that, because I think that a lot of the times you forget, the readings of the day when you're driving home, and you definitely forget some
Hmm.
homilies. Um, but his homilies were just so in depth and so profound that I just couldn't imagine having whatever he said in the church be forgotten and or only heard by the parishioners of the cathedral,
Hmm.
right? I'm going to be starting off that podcast once I'm able to figure out how to live a life with a baby and
Hmm.
keep running business,
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. So yeah, so guys, if you want to see more from Nate, I highly recommend you go check out everything we just mentioned, and I guess stay tuned for the other big things you have coming. But man, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a blast. It's been great to catch up. And I mentioned before we started recording, I love having these conversations. So thank you for sharing this time with me. I know people are going to appreciate it. And yeah, just God bless you, man. Keep the faith. Keep doing what you're doing. And I'm sure that we'll be hearing from each other in not too soon or not too long here.
There it is. Cheers, Gabe. Hey man, I really appreciate this. And
Absolutely.
I know that the men in this world need to hear a message like this. So let's keep
Hmm.
sharing it.
And that concludes episode 16 of the Operation Paragon podcast. You can find Nate at happy.sunday116 and Testament Real Estate on Instagram, and stay tuned for the podcast that he mentioned in the episode if that interests you. If you enjoyed today's show, you can follow Operation Paragon on Instagram for more, and until next time, remember that greatness is within your reach.